Is it wrong to tape the snare wires on your snare drum? As you probably know, this can vastly change the sound of the drum. In a good way or a bad way though. You're basically choking out the snare wires when you do this. So let's find out today if this is a helpful or a harmful method of altering your drum sound. Hey everybody, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. If you're new to the channel, I hope you'll subscribe. We're gonna jump over to the kit for the rest of the video. At this point, you're either going, taping snare wires is crazy, what are you talking about? Why are you making a video about this? Or you're going, oh yeah, I taped up my wires yesterday and my snare sounded great. And so there's kind of two different camps here and there's a lot of debate. So that's why I want to kind of show you some different thoughts on this and different methods of taping snare wires and see what it really does and whether or not it's a good thing or a waste of time. Well, the basic reasons for why you would tape your snare wires are pretty obvious. Just to reduce some of the buzz, to shorten the decay, to give your snare a drier sound. Like if you want to go for more of a dry Motown kind of sound, then putting some tape there will help. Or if you want to go for a concert snare sound, it does have a little more of that concert snare kind of sound where it's super quick, super dry. So I wonder what would happen if we put even more tape on there. We'll start getting there in a minute. But something else really interesting here is that did you notice that the drum seemed to now have a higher pitch compared to the way it was before? What's happened is that the snare actually feels like it's tuned a little bit higher because the snares are now creating a shorter sound. We tend to perceive that as a higher pitched drum. So by tightening our snare wires, and especially by putting tape on there, we can increase the pitch of the drum and make it sound very different. So let's see what happens if we put additional strips of tape, maybe in the middle of it. We've got a really short, really dry sound now. Now, in terms of did the pitch go up? I don't know, it's hard to say, but the sound is even shorter, and it really sounds like one of those kind of funk snares from the 70s. Which is really a pretty cool sound. So if I were gonna record something kind of funky and with that super dry, high, tight snare sound, which is very 70s-esque, there's a song I'm thinking of and I can't remember what it is. If I think about it later when I'm editing this, I will put it on the screen. There's probably a whole bunch of songs that had a snare sound like this, but I think it's super cool and it's a very unique sound. So if that's what you're going for, then absolutely taping the snare wires is gonna get you there and it will kind of increase the pitch feel of the drum. So ultimately the practical lesson to be learned here before we do some more crazy stuff with the snare wires is that you want to be willing to play around with the tension of the snare wires in between songs to maybe change the sound of the drum. If you're playing a cover gig, let's say it's like a 3-hour, 4-hour cover gig, you could be playing a wide array of songs that all have very different snare sounds, but you've got to use the same snare the whole night because it's too much of a pain to switch snares out. I don't like doing a second snare over to the side. And it's also not necessarily practical to change the tuning in between. So let me show you what I do if, let's say I'm playing a Prince song like Purple Rain and going straight from that into like Bruno Mars, 24 Karat Magic. Those are two very different snare sounds. And we wanna kind of get in the ballpark with each of those within a couple of seconds. So here's what I do for the Prince song. I'm gonna keep the snares loose, about like that. Throw this extra drum head cut out. You've seen this trick before. Put this on here, so now we've got a lower pitch. And it might not sound just like the 80s Prince snare sound, but it's kind of close. And that's a really good go-to ballad sound anyways. So let's say then from there we're going into 24 Karat Magic. Take this off. Flip this up a notch. I've got one of those snare throw-offs that lets you choose 3 different settings. If you don't have that, just tighten the knob. But this will put it a little bit tighter. You can maybe even go tighter. Yeah, more like that probably. and go a little further with this kind of sound, throw a thin bandana over the top. I like this even more. The problem with it is that it makes the drum quieter, so it's not always the most practical thing to do on a gig if you're playing in a big room. These are my tools for changing snare sound quickly. So combine that with changing the snare tension, and you can get some very different sounds very quickly. So you want to be open to really experimenting with snare tension. So that's the practical side of that. That's something that will help you on gigs, and I hope you're doing things like that. If you're playing cover gigs where you've got a lot of different styles and drum sounds to cover, changing your snare sound is a great way to change the perceived overall drum sound, because the snare is what people are hearing the most. But let's see what happens if we go crazy with the taping, because I think that dry funk sound was really cool. So let's see what happens if we cover the entire set of snare wires with tape. It's either going to sound horrible, or it might sound interesting, and maybe it could be musically appropriate in certain situations. Okay, so now we've got these snare wires completely taped up, which looks ridiculous. Looks pretty dumb. We'll see what it sounds like. Nope, sounds horrible. It also kind of has a hip hop sound. So, is it wrong to tape snare wires? Yeah, it's probably wrong to put strips of tape all the way over them. But is it wrong to put a couple of strips here and there? Absolutely not, because that'll totally alter the sound of your drum. And depending on what genre and what sound you need, that could get you there. I hope this video helped you out in some way or another. Yeah, we got a little weird and experimental with some things, but I love this kind of stuff, and I love how there's a practical application to this. So I hope you learned something. I hope you're able to apply this to your playing, to your drum sounds, to your gigging, and whatever it is that you're doing on the drums. I really hope this helped you out. If so, share the video, and I really hope you'll subscribe and become part of this community. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next week.